Alexandra Anaya was born on February 10, 1992 in Merrillville, Indiana, to Sandra Anaya and went by Alex. In 2005, 13-year-old Alex was a 7th grader at Clark Middle School and living with her mother and her 5-year-old twin sisters. She had a love for animals and always wanted a ferret. When she was younger, her mother even took her to a pet store so she could have photos taken with a ferret. In the early morning of August 13, 2005, Alex and her mother Sandra went to White Castle, bought food, and brought it home. They snacked on the food for a while, and then Sandra left to go on a date. When she returned a few hours later, Alex was nowhere to be found. At first, authorities thought she might have run away, and Sandra agreed. However, she couldn't think of a reason why because she and her daughter had a great relationship and had not fought the morning she vanished. A witness would come forward and say they saw Alex with a white man in a red 4-door Toyota car, and while Alex had a boyfriend, the witness said that the man was not him. On August 16, 2005, boaters on Chicago's Little Calumet River discovered part of her remains that had been weighed down with heavy chains. Missing were her head, arms, and legs. To this day, those body parts have never been found. She was most likely murdered not long after her mother left because they found undigested French fries in her stomach. Plus, the autopsy revealed that she had been sexually assaulted prior to her death. Also missing was a gold religious medallion that she always wore around her neck. Investigators believe the killer might have kept the medallion. Since there was no way to identify her with fingerprints or dental records, they had to rely on familial DNA. After the remains were positively identified as Alex, they searched the home of Sandra's former boyfriend, 29-year-old Rodolfo Heredia, who lived only 5 blocks from where her remains were found. Rodolfo and Sandra met when they were neighbors in Chicago's Hegwich neighborhood and then began living together. They eventually had twin daughters together. He was allegedly very abusive to Sandra, but she only broke up with him after Alex told her that he had been sexually abusing her since she was 7 years old. After the breakup, Rodolfo began stalking Sandra and Alex. He even stole their key and had a copy made. He would then use the key to enter the house when they were not home. He would repeatedly call and harass them. He vandalized their property and Sandra's car and left letters and gifts with disturbing messages on them. On the night Alex vanished, he called the home 5 different times. It's safe to say that he was obsessed with the Anaya family. Sandra also told investigators that Rodolfo had beat up his own father on his birthday and broke into a friend's home that owed him money. Another time, he was at a wedding and punched the groom in the face. For the wedding incident, he was charged with assault and battery. Another time, he punched a man and knocked him unconscious. He then picked up a log and was about to hit the man in the head with it when Sandra stopped him. On September 11, 2005, Rodolfo was arrested and charged with crossing a state line for the purpose of harassing, injuring, or killing Sandra and Alex. After being arrested, he admitted to following Alex and her mother and watching them inside their home, but denied involvement in Alex's murder. He was also charged with burglary for breaking into their home before he had a key. Unfortunately, all the details of Alex's murder were left out of the trial, and on January 6, he was found not guilty and acquitted of all the stalking charges. After that, Alex's case went cold, and while Rodolfo remains a suspect, he's never been charged in connection to her murder, and as of 2024, this case remains unsolved. Damarius Lamar Kelly was born on November 1, 1994, in Michigan City, Indiana, to Al Kelly and Chelsea Smith, and went by the nickname Heavy D. His family described him as a kind and positive person who loved his family. He was a hard worker who enjoyed eating and playing video games. He was raised by his grandmother, attended Michigan City High School, and dreamed of opening a car customization shop one day. Sadly, he would never get the chance. In 2014, 20-year-old Damarius was dating Tamala Ross, who went by Tammy, and he lived at her home along with her mother. In the early morning hours of Wednesday, November 26, 2014, Damarius was at a party at an apartment on Michigan Boulevard near the now-closed Petty's Grocery, where he got into a physical altercation with at least one man. After the fight, he vanished without a trace. His family was immediately concerned when he failed to show up to a planned Thanksgiving dinner. Tammy said she thought he might have been traveling to Milwaukee, Wisconsin to join Job Corps. However, his family didn't feel like he would have up and left without saying something. In the meanwhile, investigators were trying to locate his phone by pinging it, but it appeared to have been shut off. A little over a month later, on January 6, 2015, 2 blocks from where Damarius was last seen, his remains were found in an abandoned house on Holiday Street. When investigators arrived, they determined that foul play was involved in his death. They searched for his phone at the crime scene, but were unable to locate it. VictimsNewsOnline.com spoke with Tammy the following day and asked her to describe his cell phone. They said she asked a man in the background what brand of cell phone it was, and the man replied LG. He then shockingly says, "Hang on, I have the phone right here. Yep, it's an LG." According to Victims News Online, Tammy immediately told the man, believed to be her brother, to shut up because she was on the phone with a reporter and his cell phone was supposed to be missing. After hanging up with her, they immediately reported the conversation to the Michigan City Police Department. Was Tammy aware of what happened to Damarius? Why did she have his cell phone and was lying about it? Why did she lie about him traveling to Job Corps? My theory is that she was at the party that night and knows what happened, as do multiple other people, but they are afraid to come forward and have helped cover up his murder. Unfortunately, these are questions we don't have answers for, and as of 2024, this case remains unsolved. Daniel Reaves was born to parents Debbie and Scott. He was described as a shy but happy person who loved computers. In 2008, 25-year-old Daniel was a student at Indiana University Southeast in New Albany, Indiana, and lived with his parents. On May 3, 2008, 25-year-old Daniel was hanging out with his longtime girlfriend, Sarah Schaefer, at her home on East Schaefer Road in Jefferson County, Indiana. They watched TV until she dozed off around 2 a.m. When she woke up at 4 a.m., she had a text from Daniel that said, "I love you." She went to look for him and noticed he and his car were gone. She tried calling his cell phone but received no answer. That was the last time anyone ever heard from Daniel. When he failed to return home by the following day, she and his parents continued to call his cell phone, but once again, nothing. That's when they made the decision to report him missing. Sarah said she and Daniel had a great relationship and never went more than a day or two without talking.
We're a very affectionate couple, constantly together, haven't gotten sick of each other yet. Haven't gone more than a couple of days without speaking for the past 6 or 7 years.
She said they didn't fight that night, and she saw nothing unusual about his behavior leading up to his disappearance. They even had plans to marry after Daniel graduated. Almost a week later, on March 10, 2008, his gold 1999 Chrysler Sebring was found abandoned near Clifty Falls State Park on Green Hills Drive. Investigators searched the unlocked car and found his wallet, money, ID, and credit card, but no clues as to his whereabouts. Missing were his cell phone and car keys, and to this day, they've never been found. Daniel's parents noted that he was meticulous about locking his car, and since it was found unlocked, they don't believe he was the last person to drive it. The area around the car was also searched, but once again, nothing. While he wasn't familiar with the neighborhood his car was parked in, his family did say he knew the state park well and had hiked there on multiple occasions. Did he go hiking and meet with foul play? The park was closed at that time. Is that why he parked in the neighborhood across the street? Unfortunately, a search of the park turned up nothing. Investigators looked into the possibility that Daniel was having a mental episode, but he had no history of mental problems and didn't show any signs of being depressed before he went missing. The only thing Daniel suffered from was social anxiety. Because of this, his family believes his disappearance involves foul play. Sadly, he's been missing now for over 15 years, and as of 2024, this case remains unsolved. Dawnita Wilkerson was born on March 14, 1976. In 2020, 44-year-old Dawnita was living in Evansville, Indiana, and was a mother of 6 children. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, she had been in and out of legal troubles, was just getting out of an abusive relationship, and was also dealing with health issues. If that wasn't enough, she also had trouble finding a place to live, but things were starting to turn around. She had just recently found an apartment and was starting classes to become a medical assistant. However, Daniel, the man she had been in an abusive relationship with, continued to threaten her and her children. Even a relative of his named Cedric was participating in the threats. It got so bad she decided to change her phone number, but they eventually got a hold of the new one and the calls continued. In 2018 and 2019, Daniel was arrested 4 times for assaulting her. Prior to that, he was convicted of 4 domestic violence and battery charges in Illinois. Those 4 women also took out protective orders against him. His criminal record doesn't stop there and dates back to the 1980s. Once Dawnita was out of the relationship, she began to make amends with people she had fallen out with years ago. To those people, it was more like she was saying goodbye. On June 21, 2020, Dawnita spoke with her daughter, Kiana, and asked if her ex-boyfriend could get her a gun. This caused an argument between the two of them. Not only did she not want to communicate with her ex, but she couldn't understand why her mother wanted a gun. Later that day, Dawnita left her brother's home, telling her teenage daughter that she would be right back. Sadly, that was the last time she would ever see her mother again. Later that day, Dawnita was caught on surveillance, checking into a motel in Evansville, Indiana. She arrived in a silver 2004 Chevrolet Suburban, being driven by a man whose name hasn't been released to the public. That night, at 8:16 p.m., Dawnita was seen getting back into the Suburban outside the same motel. That was the last known sighting of her. Investigators tracked her phone and found that it pinged over 100 miles away in Carbondale, Illinois, not long after she left the motel. Unfortunately, the man who owned the Suburban has refused to cooperate in the investigation, and his name has never been released to the public. However, her family says the owner of the SUV was either Daniel or Cedric. Her family has more details, but investigators have asked them to keep it to themselves while the investigation continues. A friend of Dawnita's claimed she called her the morning she was last seen and said she was with Daniel and Cedric. Her family has been very active in this case, distributing hundreds of flyers and putting up 2 billboards. They've also organized searches, which were interrupted by Daniel taunting them. Daniel even told Dawnita's daughters that if she was dead, she deserved it. Someone then tricked businesses into taking down missing posters by claiming she had been found. That could be because it was falsely reported that her remains were found in a seafood restaurant in Kentucky. This was definitely not true. Her loved ones believe someone even paid homeless people to pull up signs from yards and shops. Sounds like someone really doesn't want this case in the public eye. Unfortunately, as of 2024, Dawnita is still missing, and this case remains unsolved. Sharon K. Pope was born on January 15, 1953, and her sister Lillian May was born on June 22, 1955, to parents Marilyn and Donald. They were siblings to 12 other children who had unfortunately been raised by other family members or put in the foster care system. Sharon and Lillian, on the other hand, remained best friends for years to come. In 1973, 20-year-old Sharon was living with relatives in Gary, Indiana, and working at Calvin's Grill on Dunes Highway. She had married 22-year-old Douglas DeJesus, and they had 2 children together, but they were currently separated. She was also 6 months pregnant with her 3rd child. Her sister, 18-year-old Lillian, lived at Ted's East Town mobile home city and worked half a mile away from Calvin's Grill at the Dunes 1220 bowling alley. She was pregnant, just like Sharon, but was almost at full term. The two women were well known in the area and had very active social lives. They were also known to frequent the bars between Calvin's Grill and the bowling alley. On the evening of December 13, 1973, Sharon and Lillian left Calvin's Grill and began walking toward the bowling alley, but would sadly never make it. The next morning, at about 10:15 a.m., a city employee by the name of Alfred Schlitz, who was checking the sewage lift station at the corner of East 15th Avenue and Clay Street, found both their bodies. They were found fully clothed and lying face down beside each other. They had both been beaten and shot to death execution style with a shotgun. Sharon's injuries were so severe that her face was unrecognizable. Near their bodies were several .410 gauge shotgun shells. Unfortunately, it had rained overnight and no DNA evidence was collected. Also, some of the case records were later destroyed by a flood. Douglas was immediately a suspect and questioned, but no charges were brought against him. Considering how badly Sharon was beaten and no signs of sexual assault, was Douglas mad about the sisters' close relationship and blamed it on his failed marriage? Sadly, without DNA evidence, we may never know. 4 years after the murders, an unlikely advocate for justice in their case was their brother Larry Pope, who grew up in foster care and had never even met Sharon or Lillian. When he was 17 years old, a caseworker handed him an envelope containing several newspaper clippings about the murders. He said that was the day he decided to seek justice for their murders. Another sibling by the name of Martha Hogue also got involved in the case. She began talking to family members and discovered that her stepmother, Mary's daughter Vicky, was supposed to pick up Sharon and Lillian on the night of the murders. When Martha went by to speak with her stepmother, Vicky walked in and got really upset at the sight of her and stormed out of the room. Mary claimed that Vicky was upset because Martha looked so much like Lillian. However, her reaction made Martha believe that maybe Vicky knew more about that night than she's let on. After Sharon's death, her sons moved in with their father Douglas. He then quickly abandoned them, leaving his girlfriend to raise them. In 1998, the oldest son was sadly shot to death. Larry and Martha, along with family members, continue to seek justice, but as of 2024, this case remains unsolved.